Ladies and gentlemen, I am Caroline Mouton from Luxembourg and I will speak about the high number of ACL injuries after the summer break in team ball sports. It is estimated that there is 735 million players in football, basketball and handball over the world. Knowing that the prevalence of ACL injuries in these populations varies between 1.6% and 7% from previous data, we can estimate that there is over 30 million of players having an ACL injury in football, handball and basketball. Usually, the annual incidence is commonly reported in adult players, but we still miss some information about seasonal aspect of these injuries in non-professional sports. The aim of this study was to analyze the distribution of ACL injuries during the season in team ball sports based on a retrospective analysis of a hospital-based registry. The hypothesis was that ACL injuries in soccer, handball and basketball were more common within the 2 first months of the season in comparison to the rest of the year. We extracted 1,103 ACL injuries from 2011 to 2018 from a center-based registries. Then we selected traumatic sport-related injuries. In the second steps, injuries occurring during football, handball and basketball. And lastly, injuries in athletes less than 35 years old involved in non-professional competitive sports. At the end, we analyzed 371 injuries, mainly occurring in football with 258 cases. The injury distribution over the calendar year was divided into 6 segments of 2 months. Segment 1, S1, represented the 2 first months of the season, being September and October for soccer and October and November for handball and basketball. Chi-square tests were used to compare the injury distribution according to patient characteristics. The studied population mainly included males, 282 cases. 23% of patients had a previous ACL injuries, with 35 graft rupture, 46 contralateral ACL injuries, and 5 with both. Injuries were mainly non-contact injuries in 65% of the cases. There was a significant variation of the distribution of ACL injuries among segments, with almost 1/3 of ACL injuries occurring at the beginning of the season. There was no difference found between gender, age, injury mechanism, history of previous ACL reconstruction, and contralateral ACL injuries. However, there was a significant difference in ACL injury distribution between sports. Mainly in segment 2, there were less ACL injuries in football, only 9%, but there were more ACL injuries in football in segment 5. The main finding of the present study was that 1/3 of ACL injuries occurred within first 2 months of the season in non-professional team ball sports. The distribution of injuries was not uniform across the season and differed between sports. This high incidence of ACL injuries in the early part of the regular seasons was already shown by Anderson and Hall in national collegiate athletes. This may be to the combination of a sudden increase in training match load and lack of physical preparation. This indicates that we should increase awareness of coaches and practitioners to implement ACL injury prevention programs during preseason. In soccer, our findings are in agreement with previous one, with a peak of injuries in September and October, segment 1, and a second peak from March to May, segment 5, which may be here due to cumulative fatigue. The soccer season is really dependent on outdoor condition, and the low incidence we are observing in segment 2, representing November and December, may reflect bad meteorological condition. While we couldn't find any influence of history of previous ACL reconstruction and contralateral ACL injuries in the injury distribution over the year, Slater et al. Showed that the odds of recurrent ACL injury during preseason was 2.8 times that of regular season. But our study is not without limitation. This is a retrospective analysis of a hospital registry, and data could not be cross-checked with injury data from the relevant sports organization. We need to confirm our findings on a larger number of patients and also better identify injury context. To conclude, there is a seasonal variability of ACL injuries in non-professional team ball sports such as soccer, handball, and basketball. There is a high occurrence of ACL injuries within the 2 first months of a new season, which is an indication to implement ACL injury prevention programs during the preseason period. Thank you for your attention.